Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I'm Vulkan, and today we are jumping into one of my favorite builds in Outriders. So this is the Blighted Rounds Technomancer, and if you've stuck with me from the first Outriders into this DLC, then you know that this is the one build that I just love to play. I'm a big fan of dot-based builds. So Affliction Warlock in World of Warcraft, I was a huge fan. There's a lot of different ways to make dot-based builds in like the Rift MMO. So really anything with dots and afflictions, I am all about. I don't know what it is about the playstyle, I love it. So Blighted Rounds Technomancer really kind of fits my playstyle. Now, I'm going to warn you, this is not for everyone. Everyone is not going to love this build. It's very approachable, it's very easy. There aren't a lot of requirements to get started with the Blighted Rounds Technomancer. But for some people, it's not complex enough. It's not engaging enough. You're going to be spending most of your time aiming down the sights, just mowing down enemies, but you're going to be dealing so much damage that things are going to just fall over. Now, what I have here is a good starter build for heading into Worldslayer Endgame, for Tarya Gratar, for getting into Apocalypse tier like 1920. This is going to get you there. You can see my firepower is lower than some other builds out there as well, because like I said, there's a high ceiling for this one, and it is definitely not min-maxed by any means. But I did want to put this out there because there are some people that enjoy knowing where they want to go, having a target to shoot for. So let's go ahead, let's dive in and break down the Blighted Rounds Technomancer. So let's start with the skills. So the skill lineup is pretty straightforward. We have Blighted Rounds, which is our, bread and butter, right? This is going to be the one-stop shop for everything for this build. So what this does is it converts your magazine from just physical bullets to toxic infused bullets. Now the toxic infused bullets are key because this is going to change your damage type from physical, which will check against armor, which is typically higher on enemies, into anomaly power, which is then going to check against enemy resistances, which are lower. This is why you see such a massive increase in DPS by just using Blighted Rounds. So the whole kind of build revolves around making sure we keep Blighted Rounds up as much as possible. So Blighted Rounds will last until you either reload or you switch weapons. So any mods that prompt reloads or weapon switches like Clip Roller, we're going to avoid those completely. We need to look for things that replenish our magazine. So replenishing is different than reloading. That just magically adds more bullets into your mag, and because of that, we can extend our Blighted Rounds duration. Now the second skill we have here is the Blighted Turret. Now, the reason we take this one is we do get some weapon damage increases from our skill tree, and there's also a mod that you can use to switch it from toxic to freeze, which is what we want. We'll talk about that here in a moment. But if you do not have a particular mod called Ice Component that'll switch this to freeze, you can still use the Cryo Turret if you want to, but you're not going to get the skill tree buff that we'll talk about here in a moment. So really this is dealer's choice, but once you unlock a Blighted Turret, I would highly recommend using this one. And then our last skill is Cold Snap. So this is going to be a huge AoE that's going to freeze enemies, and this is part of our DPS. So we have Blighted Rounds that's going to deal a lot of damage, but then we also have Cold Snap and the ability to freeze enemies. Frozen enemies are where the other big part of our DPS comes from, and that's because we have the Borealis Monarch gear set. So this set will cause enemies that are frozen to take 50% increased damage, but there's also a mod in there called Icicle Storm that'll cause enemies that are frozen to explode, dealing a large amount of damage, and this can chain. So if you kill one enemy that's frozen, they explode, and kill other enemies that are frozen, they will also explode. This is a really good way to quickly take off tons of health from bosses if you manage to kind of line up and position them all correctly. Now, if you don't have the mods that are going to support Cold Snap, or you don't have the Borealis Monarch set, then you can switch off of Cold Snap and go for something like a Fixing Wave if you need more survivability, or you can go into something like a Pain Launcher that's just a cast and forget until you get those pieces of gear or those mods that we need. So right now, this is the setup. This is the optimal setup. We have Blighted Rounds, Blighted Turret, and Cold Snap. Now the next thing I want to talk about is the class, because we'll go through the skill tree, then we'll go talk about gear, and then once that's done, we'll come back to the Pax Trees, because those are going to be kind of dependent on what kind of gear we have equipped. So what we see here is the typical blighted rounds setup for the Technomancer. I'm not going to go through the small nodes. I'm just going to go through the big nodes here, because the small ones are just things like weapon damage, you know, cooldown reduction, armor pierce. You can see kind of how it's laid out. But the big nodes here, we have exposing toxin. So every time toxic is afflicted onto an enemy, they also get the vulnerable status. The vulnerable status is going to increase the damage they take for a certain duration. Now this is absolutely key, because as you're going through Tarya Gratar, you're going through higher level expeditions, enemies you're going to be facing are going to have a lot of health, and they're going to have higher resistances and higher armor. So making sure that you have exposing toxin and you're applying that vulnerable status, you're going to be able to deal more damage. Therefore, you're going to be able to extend the life of your blighted rounds a little bit more, and you're going to increase your clear speed. Now here we have marked for execution. I know this is a smaller node, but still it's worth calling out. This is going to cause vulnerable to be 40% more effective. Now the next one I took is blur screen. This can be switched around if you need to. This just increases your health regeneration threshold by 20% of your max health. So really what this does is makes it so your health can regenerate further, rather than being like a third, it's a half or something like that. So really it's survivability. I typically pick this up whenever I'm going through progression or I'm under geared for something, because it's really easy to dive into cover, have your health regenerate, and have more of a buffer between you and death than the typical, you know, 1/3 or 30%. We also pick up Assault Master because assault weapons are the main type of weapon that we want to use. So light machine guns, submachine guns, double guns, those are great, and I would say use them if you don't have a good assault rifle, but assault rifles are typically what we want to use for this build. They have a great balance of long range and close range, they have a good magazine size, they deal a considerable amount of damage, and their handling is a lot better in my opinion, as well as their accuracy. So they're really just kind of a jack of all trades, and for this type of build, we want to make sure that we maximize all of that. So going with an assault rifle is going to be the best method. I didn't take two sides of power right now, so because I'm kind of progressing and pushing through some stuff, I still have blur screen, but I might take this out and instead put it into two sides of power. Now you can also just drop this engineer and keep both, but you might want to go and grab like a small node over here for charged gunshot. It really is up to you. But two sides of power is going to increase the damage that you take by 10%, but also the damage you deal by 10%. So once you get to a point where you don't really worry about your health too much anymore, then you can go two sides of power and get a nice 10% damage increase, and then increase your map clear speed. We also have Grand Amplification. Granted, this is anomaly power, so we're not exactly like thrilled about it because we're a firepower based build, but anomaly power is still something that's easy to pick up, especially right here. And this is actually going to increase it by every BR8 impact amplifier class node, which are these right here. So we're going to get a nice little boost there. Then we're going to pick up UT14 clips because, again, increasing magazine size is going to help us exponentially. This is something that we really need to focus on, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in Ascension. But because blighted rounds converts all of the rounds in your magazine to blighted or toxic infused, we want to make sure we have the deepest magazine possible. That way we don't have a risk of reloading and then losing our big buff, because once we do that, we're no longer Super Saiyan, we're just regular good old-fashioned Goku, and that's bad. So not that Goku's bad, Goku's awesome, but anyway, we're not Super Saiyan anymore. So we want to get our UT14 clips, and we want to make sure that magazine size is huge. We're going to go Purge instead of Charged Gunshot, and then we're going to go up here to Empowering Antenna. So activating a Decay skill increases your weapon damage by 30% for 8 seconds. Now, this is where that Blighted Turret comes into play. Remember I said Blighted Turret over Cryo Turret. This is kind of why. So when we activate our Blighted Rounds, this is going to give us a 30% damage increase for 8 seconds. Great. But our plan is Blighted Rounds never comes off. We never have to recast it. So our Blighted Turret is going to then be our prompt for Empowering Antenna. Now, because we have turrets and because we can have a mod that gives us 2 turrets, we should be able to keep this up pretty frequently by just kind of alternating our turret summons, and that's going to give us that weapon damage increase that's going to be really, really powerful. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Ascension really quick. So we have status power, we have armor, we have magazine size, and then I'm going to drop points into cooldown reduction, weapon damage, and once I'm done with armor and magazine size, I'm also going to go into critical damage and critical chance. So in the Ascension tree, you can only go up to 10. That's the cap. So I cannot go beyond 10 status power for a 10% increase. So once I put 4 more points in here, 4 more points in here, I can start dropping points into the next nodes that I want to do. So you might be wondering why I chose these ones. So first, status power. This is going to increase the damage that Toxic deals, which is great. But Toxic is not the main source of our DPS. Status power, instead, what I'm placing the most value on here is the fact that it increases your freeze duration. And keeping enemies frozen for a longer period of time is going to help this build out quite a bit, because we have that 50% increased damage to frozen enemies. So this allows us to damage them for a longer period of time and get that buff, but it also gives us a higher chance to actually kill those enemies and then shatter them. So freeze duration is a big thing. So status power isn't for Toxic, it's actually for freeze. We're taking armor for extra survivability. We're taking magazine size because, again, the deeper the magazine, the better things are. So we want to make sure that this is completely maxed out. That way we have more bullets for our Blighted Rounds build. And then it's always great to have crit damage and crit chance, because there are some mods that'll proc off of crits. So we want to make sure that we take advantage of those. Cooldown reduction, if for some reason we do lose Blighted Rounds, being able to get that back as soon as possible is absolutely critical. So cooldown reduction gains a lot of priority in this sense. And then weapon damage. So weapon damage is going to affect how much damage we're actually pumping out with Blighted Rounds, so this is a DPS increase. So that's our Ascension tree. So far, like I said, this is a more starter-oriented build, so I would say focus on those. Beyond that, it's kind of dealer's choice on really what you're looking for. If you're having trouble staying alive, you can drop things into max health, into resistance, even elite damage mitigation if you would like to. If you're okay on survivability, but you're looking a little low on the DPS side of things, you can drop some more stuff down here into close range damage and long range damage. That way you can really kind of spread that battlefield and lengthen it a little bit so you're more effective at a further range. So that's what we're looking for Ascension. I'm going to hold off on the Pax tree for now, because, like I said, we want to talk about the gear, and then we'll go back to the Pax tree, because then it'll make a lot more sense. So let's talk about the gear that we're using for this build. So I actually recorded this video a couple days ago, and then I kept playing, and I managed to get the Deathscape assault rifle that dropped, which I like. Up until this point, I was using, where is it? Oh, here it is. My Hunchback Defiant. So this was great. I got a nice critical damage increase. I was using Weakness Trap, which, by the way, is a fantastic mod. This deals a large amount of damage and inflicts weakness on enemies within a 5-meter area. If you have this, I would highly recommend using it, because it's going to reduce the damage they deal by like 30%, which is going to give you some more survivability. So as you're progressing through Tarya Gratar or Endgame expeditions, this is going to help quite a bit. And then for our Deathscape. So I'm experimenting with this one a little bit. I like Stigmatized. So Stigmatized is going to cause successful shots to inflict toxic and then mark the target for 5 seconds. If you kill a marked enemy, they're going to explode for 155,000 damage in a 6-meter radius, and then mark all the enemies that are caught in the explosion. So this is a really good supplementary AoE clearing method. But then I also got Death Ray. Now, Death Ray was an interesting one. I talked about it in my review a little bit, and after playing with it a little bit more, I kind of like the way it works, and I feel like it's actually a pretty solid tier 3 mod, especially for Blighted Rounds, because it is dealing 45,000 damage every 0.3 seconds. And because this build is all about aiming down sights, it's all about shooting, it's all about making sure you're constantly pumping out a stream of damage, Death Ray actually works pretty well. And I would say that it's a free damage too. You don't even have to use bullets. So if you're getting like low on your ammunition and you don't want Blighted Rounds to come off cooldown, you don't have to do anything. You can literally just aim at an enemy, and this is going to passively deal damage to them and keep you kind of in the game. So Death Ray I do like, but if you don't have Death Ray, if you don't have Stigmatized, This is sort of the build, or the sort of the weapon that I really like and like the setup of. It was critical point and weakness trap. Now in terms of your revolver, honestly, just equip whatever one has the highest firepower. We're not using this very often, so we just want to make sure we get those firepower bumps. Now in terms of stats for your weapons, so we want to go for crit damage, we want to go for status power, we want to go for long range damage. Now you can see Deathscape doesn't really do well in those. Skill Life Leech is obviously good. We can get things off of cooldown a little bit quicker. Healing Received is okay. I don't really need that too much, but my thing is crit damage and status power, long range damage, close range damage. Those are the ones that you really want to look for. Now let's talk about our armor. This is where the build actually comes together. So we are using the Borealis Monarch set. Now this is a set from the original Outriders. It's still a very solid set. I am seeing some people move away from it and go towards some different armor sets, which is perfectly fine. This one just tends to work really well for me. And honestly, and I don't know about other people's RNG, but I seem to always get Borealis drops. They seem to be a little bit more common than things like Plague Sowers, for instance. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just my luck. I'm not entirely sure. But I do want to say that because this is a starter build, this isn't necessarily required, right? This isn't something that's like, you have to have this gear set to make this whole thing work, and if you don't have it, the build's going to fall apart and it's not going to do as well. That's not the way it is at all. I'm going to give you a required list of mods, and then I'm going to give you a supplementary list of mods that are going to help kind of bring this thing together. If you can get your hands on those, you'll be set. But otherwise, try to shoot for the Borealis Monarch set. Okay, so the gear set itself comes with bonus firepower, status power, and long range damage on the helmet. And it comes with the Twins mod, which is going to allow us to place 2 turrets before triggering cooldown, again, which is awesome. 2 turrets is always better than 1. We have Ice Component, which is going to flip our Blighted turret to freeze instead of toxic. Now this is good because this is going to freeze enemies, which will allow us to take advantage of the 50% increased damage on frozen enemies. You can see down there at the very bottom on the 3-piece set bonus active. It also increases our critical hit damage by 10% for all party members after you use Cold Snap. So that's something that if you play in a group, that's going to be useful. Now this third mod, I'm not entirely sure if this was part of the base game or if this is a new mod, but this was really cool. I haven't seen this one. So Alchemical Mastery. While Blighted Rounds is active, you're going to receive a weapon damage or anomaly power bonus equal to 15% of your status power, based on whichever one is higher. You can see my firepower is considerably higher than my anomaly power, so I'm going to get a 15% increase, granted a 15% of my status power increase to weapon damage. So if we look here, my status power is 113.1, and my weapon damage bonus is 96.5, so 15% of this is going to add to this. During the hands-on kind of press release, I was able to get up to 200 and some % weapon damage bonus, which was great, and I was just melting everything around me. So that was awesome to see. So like I said, if you can get your hands on that mod, things open up pretty quickly for you. Okay, so I also have the robe of the Borealis Monarch. This is transmog to look like the Flame Leper robes because I like those a little bit more. But again, we have bonus firepower, status power, long range damage. We have Icicle Storm. This is, remember I talked about how this was the mod that's going to be key. This is going to cause Cold Snap to freeze enemies. And if you kill enemies frozen by this skill, they're going to explode. And this is going to deal a large amount of damage, and it's going to chain. So if you kill multiple enemies, or one enemy, they'll blow up and then kill multiple enemies. If you can position like a brood mother around a bunch of Porphyro, freeze them all, kill the Porphyro, they're all going to explode, and they're going to deal a huge amount of damage to that brood mother. So it's really good for clearing bosses and things like that, or elites if you need to. But when it comes to actually like single target damage, this is obviously going to be a little bit weaker, especially in Target Guitar, where you don't really have any ads that you can freeze around a boss. So it loses its effectiveness there. But in terms of clearing a map, this is really awesome. We also have Captain Hunter, which is going to increase your damage against elites by 16%. We have our first new piece, that's the Flame Leper legs. I threw Anomaly Echo on here, which is going to give us a 42,000 firepower boost for 6 seconds whenever we use a skill. We're dropping turrets like crazy. We're using Cold Snap like crazy, so this is constantly up. Now our other one is Virulent Compound. This kind of plays into the whole toxic thing. So we're going to deal 10% more damage to elites afflicted by toxic, and then those afflicted elites will explode when they're killed, dealing 50,000 damage, and then spreading that status to other enemies within a 5-meter radius. So again, this just helps with explosions for map clear, and it's a pretty solid mod, especially if you're using toxic all the time like we are. The next one is Plague Sower's Hands. So this is our first kind of off piece here. So this one has max health, which is okay. I would say if you can't have anything else, then max health is a solid one to take. We have status power, again, freeze duration, and close range damage. Now, this one is pretty solid. We have Euthanizer, which is going to allow us to deal 16% more damage to enemies afflicted by toxic. So again, we have vulnerable, and now we're starting to stack all of these damage increases to anything afflicted with toxic, which is great because we need to clear things quickly. And then our other mod is Trick Up the Sleeve. This one is, I will say, key. It's always been critical for a Blighted Rounds build, because while the skill is active, anything you kill is going to grant you 30% bullets back into your mag. It's going to replenish your magazine, which is very, very helpful because it allows Blighted Rounds to stay up for a longer period of time. And then at the very bottom, we have our Boots of the Borealis Monarch. Again, we have some max health, cooldown reduction, long range damage. Here I have Toxic Lead, which is going to replenish 40% of our magazine whenever we kill something with toxic. And then we have Sharp Eye, which is going to cause critical shots while aiming down the sights to give us 18,000 firepower for 5 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This is why that critical damage increase, or critical chance increase rather, is incredibly important, because we're able to stack up more firepower bonuses, which will then increase our DPS. So there's a slight ramp up with this one, but Sharp Eye is a great mod to have. So let's talk about some of the other mods that are nice to have. So my list here that I have, we have Frostbite. This is going to help reduce resistances even further on frozen enemies so that Blighted Rounds can deal even more damage. We have Spare Mag, which is going to be great because it allows you to reload once and keep Blighted Rounds up. That Alchemical Mastery one that we talked about a little bit earlier. We also have Stand Tall, which is great because covers for cowards, right? That was a big mantra that Outriders used when they were promoting the game originally. So if you're outside of cover, you're going to get a big firepower increase. And honestly, the way this build is set up, we shouldn't be in cover very often at all. And then lastly, we have Freezing Boost. So Freezing Boost is great because it allows us to deal more damage to anything that's frozen. So on top of that 50%, we also gain another 8%. Now this mod was reduced. It used to be 15%. They did nerf it a little bit down to 8, but still 8% is better than no percent. So those are the ones that I would highly recommend looking for outside of the ones we have here. So now that we have all of the gear, we have the stats, we have all of those things, let's talk about that Pax skill tree. So this might be a little surprising, but we're not going the Desolator tree here at the top. We're actually going the Overseer tree down here at the bottom, and I'll tell you why. So first up, we're going to take Undying. Every 5% of your missing health increases your weapon leech and skill leech by 5%. Then we have Accelerator, which is going to increase our weapon damage by 100% of our weapon leech. So current value is 15%. We have Apothecary, so you're going to pulse every 5 seconds and heal all players, including yourself, within a 25-meter radius of 2% of all the damage done between you, or by you, between each pulse. So this is a great little self-heal. Then we have Purification Protocol. This is where our turrets start to really take off. So we have the dual turrets. We have the Blighted turret. They're freezing things. They're pulling aggro. They're already providing a lot of benefits. Now our turrets are going to pulse and remove up to 1 negative status effect from us and our allies, and this happens every roughly 5 seconds. So every 5 seconds it's going to pulse and remove a dot. It's going to pulse and remove a negative effect. And in Target Gratar, you have a lot of freeze, you have a lot of bleed, and you have a lot of vulnerability. Those 3 things hit you quite often. So making sure that you have Purification Protocol is going to help immensely because you're able to cleanse with really no downside and very, very little investment because you want to have your turrets up anyway. So this is going to help immensely, especially if you're going to be playing in a group with other people. But the real showstopper here is Lead Seeker. So Lead Seeker is going to pulse again every 5 seconds. It'll pulse. It's going to replenish, not reload, but replenish 30% of your ammo. So blighted rounds, it's going to restore 30% of your magazine back into your magazine. So it's going to replenish it. This is incredibly powerful. Reason being, if you're in between waves of enemies, before you would have to, like, let's say you had 18 bullets left, you'd have to kind of plan and say, okay, I need a weak enemy that I can kill to then proc Toxic Lead and proc Trick Up the Sleeve. That way I can get more ammo back in my magazine and keep blighted rounds going. Now you just have to drop a turret and literally sit and wait, and it will refill your magazine for you, so you have a full mag for the next wave. And this also helps when you're running around and you're trying to stay alive and you want to keep your blighted rounds up to increase your DPS. You can sit there and just let your turret pulse, and it's going to restore your ammo for you. But that's not the only thing, and that would be great if that was, but it also gives you a 20% increased damage buff for 5 seconds for yourself and your allies. So you're going to be looking at a 30% ammo refresh, and then on top of that, a 20% damage bonus that'll then give you even more oomph to clear enemies more quickly. So Lead Seeker, you know, I've tried out all of these, right? And this is the one that I've loved the most because I feel like it really, truly rounds out and adds to the Blighted Rounds Technomancer build. The other ones were great. I mean, Dissection, every status you inflict on an enemy, you can increase your damage by 5% to them. That's great, especially if you have like a build that is based around just applying as many statuses as possible. You could have the anomaly mutation or whatever it's called mod that will switch your status to a different status. Maybe you can kind of, you know, cheese that a little bit to get a damage increase. I'm not sure, but I've just gone through and I've looked at all of these and I've tested a lot of them, and none of them have the same kind of staying power that Lead Seeker has for this particular build. So I would say go this direction. Going through the campaign, you're gonna get 3 points by default, so you'll be able to get to Apothecary. After that, you need to clear the first boss of Tarja Gratar, and I believe you need to do something else. I think maybe the second boss of Tarja Gratar. At that point, you'll get your other 2 Pax points, and you'll be able to fill out the tree. I know you don't have to complete it, I don't think. So I got them very quickly. But anyway, that is the build, guys. So that's it. That is taking the original build that we had from the original Outriders for Blighted Rounds and flipping it into the Worldslayer build. Like I said, this isn't for everyone, but this one has gotten me through quite a few apocalyptic tiers. It's made things a lot smoother for me, but still, the sky is the limit for this one. We do not have it min-maxed yet, and as I continue to work on it, I will let you guys know any updates that I come across. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, whether you use this build or not. If you like action RPGs, looter content, or anything with epic and legendary drops, consider subscribing to the channel. And if you would like to support the channel beyond a normal subscription, click that join button below to see some of the perks that you'll receive. Thank you all so much for watching. This has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you next time.